Nay, so the meeting minutes are approved. Okay. All right. Next thing is the agenda. We covered the meeting minutes. So now there's two items on the agenda. One is the discussion regarding the self-haul separation requirement recommendation presentations at the advisory committee meetings. So I assume staff is going to start on that.
Well, I can speak to it. First off, I mean, one of the things that we did was, if you guys remember, this subcommittee, we kind of discussed things and we felt like that we needed to bring in the stakeholders to hear from the stakeholders.
Right.
And that the committee felt like it wouldn't be good just to have the stakeholders to come to the subcommittee. Why not go to the full committee, which they did. All four stakeholders, as far as the companies go, stakeholders, it was Waste Management, Metro, Republic, and Rumpke all gave presentations, and there was a lot of discussion. And so we completed that task that the subcommittee wanted us to do, which is to have that discussion at the advisory committee. So now it comes back to, what does this subcommittee want to do with self-haul, and move forward with it, not move forward with it? Do we want to draft something? Basically, it's where does the subcommittee want to go as far as the self-haul recommendations? Do you want me to paraphrase what they were?
That might be helpful quickly. Yeah, some of us attended and some didn't.
Okay, so basically the self-haul, there's a couple different recommendations that kind of interlock together. One is that says that any disposal facility have a self-haul drop-off site for materials to be put into bins or be able to be segregated so that those items can be recovered and recycled. Self-haul is defined as a residentially generated and transported material. So whoever made the material is transporting that same material. They're not turning it over to anybody else. And it would be in a car, a pickup truck, or on a trailer. We're not talking about big quantities. So it would be required that a facility have these facilities, and some of them have these things in certain amounts. The Waste Reduction Center is already doing a lot of this already. And then after that, the recommendation was that citizens would be required that if they're hauling self-haul, that they would have to utilize these bins to do this recovery. So, there was also stuff about consistent signage, making sure that recycling at one facility looks like recycling at another facility as far as the signage and stuff goes, so we get some consistency. Some of the concerns was material liability for contamination. I think we determined that it doesn't increase or decrease any of that because the facility's already accepting the material. And every material that comes in through the gate is screened. They're supposed to be screened, whether it's going to recycling self-haul or if it's going to the disposal pile. The other concern that was brought up mostly at from the stakeholders was space. Space is not always going to be an easy thing. I mean, you've got a postage stamp that you're operating on. How do you manage those things? And I think there's some legit concerns there. Not everybody can necessarily operate on their property. So you would have to, anything that would be created would have to take that into consideration. Another one, they felt like that it was safety was an issue. And there was a lot of bouncing back and forth on whether or not that this increases safety risk or decreases safety risk. You know, without drawing any conclusions to there, everybody kind of heard the discussion and they can draw their own conclusions. That's what this is about. So at this point, unless anybody has anything to add, if I was inaccurate or I missed anything that I needed to add, I think that it falls back to this subcommittee to say, maybe we want to investigate it further. Maybe we want to go to field trips to see these places. Maybe we just want to table it and say we don't want to do this anymore. Or we want to move forward with drafting something. Either it's guidelines, either it's a regulation, or if it's suggesting an ordinance. However you guys would want to do something like that. But in the end, what we need is to have something that we can take back to the committee on our decision and say, this is the subcommittee's recommendation. These are the pros and cons about moving forward, and we need to justify our decision.
I want to ask a question.
Greg, you're muted.
Go ahead, Bruce. I'll go next.
Is that going to be, I mean, with all this they're going to do, is that going to add some cost to these facilities, and how they're going to handle that?
You know, the way that it was written was that all it needed to be was less than disposal cost. You know, and that doesn't have to be a greatly less, but they're already accepting it at a certain cost for disposal. So that part of it's kind of a wash. It's anything that's above and beyond. A lot of the materials actually had a value that was, you know, less than that. You know, metal, obviously, Bruce, if you get a dumpster full of metal, they're going to get income from it. Other things they wouldn't get an income from. So where that would fall as far as increasing or decreasing their costs would be up to the facility and their pricing structure. So all in all, this is one of the smallest sectors that we have. And so as far as a volume of, let's say 10 tons versus a volume of 10,000 tons of disposal, all in all, any kind of increased cost to them would be probably minimal as it relates to their overall operating expenses.
Thank you.
So that's what I wanted to clarify was the quantity, because putting aside my thoughts about being lectured about being safe, when we're talking also above ground CNG tanks and no requirement to get COVID vaccines, how much are we dealing with? Because it's very clear these people are not going to go quietly. They're going to piss and moan and fight us. I'd like to know what kind of quantities are they dealing with, and is it worth the fight?
Well, let me look at something here very quickly as far as the waste composition study, and things might have changed a little bit from that date. And I can tell you what it was estimated to be, the volume.
Thank you.
As compared to everything else. Okay, total residential curbside waste is 240,000 tons. Multifamily was 48,000 tons. Bulky waste was 19. ICI is 335,000 tons. Self-haul residential is 35,000 tons. So it's basically 4% of the waste that's out there. according to the waste composition study. So it's by far the smallest percentage of everything that you have.
Thank you.
All right, I was just gonna say two things. One is, thanks, Pete. I think that's a pretty good summary of what all you said and included. And then the second thing, when you mentioned safety, I thought there was also a lot of talk about liability, and I thought they were gonna go back and talk to lawyers. Is there anything still open from a liability standpoint?
Well, we kind of talked about that, and some of that had to do with RECRA, which is a lot of the rules as far as waste disposal and who is liable for it. And that goes back to that point. And I think I talked with Pat Stallard, who I think is a really good resource for this because he's with Stites and Harbinson, and he's an environmental attorney, and this is what he basically does.
Yeah.
Now, Pat, I'm not sure, has been able to address the full committee, or maybe he did in my absence, but his take on it was that all material going to a disposal facility that's going to be handled by the disposal facility, we're not changing the makeup of that material. It's coming to the gate right now. The only thing that we're changing is what container that it's going into. So in essence, a load comes in, whether it's going to the landfill section or to the recovery section, it is both screened for unaccepted items. That unaccepted item list won't change for any of the facilities. So the only difference is that, they was going to take it to the landfill anyway, or they're going to take it to get it recovered on the other hand. So the opinion there was that it doesn't increase any liability and it doesn't decrease any liability.
It's all the same, only different.
Yeah, basically. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're not changing any of the makeup of what's coming into the facility.
I have a follow-up question about costs. Pete, you were kind of referring, it sounded to me like operating costs. But when we heard these presentations, it sounded like there might be some upfront adjustments needing to be made at the facility if that were to happen. So if there's costs related to that, would we say that's, made up later because of recycling, or how would that be addressed, I guess?
Yeah, and I'm probably not the right person or the best person to answer this, but it's going to depend upon what facility, the space that they have, and the safety that they need to watch for. And if you're like the WRC, which is Metro's facility, we're on a postage stamp. We're on a very small footprint, and yet we have been able to finagle things over the years to make things happen. If we had to suddenly start increasing or add another item, if we had to pave something or we had to change a traffic flow or anything like that, we might have some cost there. It's capital cost up front. It's part of any operation that you would add to a facility, whether it's this or that. It will depend upon the facility. It can be a simple fix with existing stuff, or it can be a complicated fix. Most of the places already want to have the citizens not commingled with big trucks. So, some of this is already done, in my opinion.
Is there any other comment on that particular thing from anybody out there? I know it's kind of like what Karen was saying, there's initial fixed cost perhaps versus, the ongoing cost should be covered by the recoverable material. But I thought some people would say, like, if they have to buy new dumpsters or new something, or hire a person to stand there or something like that. So.
Practice is Bruce at Rumpke.
Bruce, you're a little quiet.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Better, yep. Thank you.
Part of our challenge as a subcommittee is to do an economics review of what impact it's going to have on the facilities. And I don't think a cursory review of the materials are going to pay for the costs, get it to the level needed. I know we are very tight on space. We don't have the containers areas available to locate separate containers for different type of recyclables. We heard the same thing from Upper Level Road Transfer Station. And we heard similar concerns from Waste Management that seem to be not being addressed with Pete's overview. And the cost implications of what would need to take place to allow this to happen at these existing facilities. Now, should we move forward towards some type of ordinance, I think it would be premature without doing that full economic impacts study on the potential gain of this percentage of material. And Pete, you said how many tons of waste?
Well, it's 35,000 tons is what they were talking about. And of course, you would have to look at the volumes for each facility. I mean, it's not 35,000 tons for each facility. It might be 8,000 tons for Rumpke. And, you know, a lot of that could be yard waste, which you guys already handle.
Correct. But just as a rough number, Pete, when I'm looking at it, 35,000 tons at an average of $40 a ton, which is, I would say, representative of our disposal in the service area. You're looking at $1.4 million of impacts spread across different companies that are receiving this material. And whether they cannot, if they cannot receive it, they're going to incur a loss. If they can accept it, how much is going to be cost, how much cost is going to be incurred to be able to accept it?
Bruce, if I could, and I apologize, everybody, that I have to leave right after this. But when you say that it's $4 million, but if your tipping cost was $40 a ton, you was going to be collecting that $40 a ton at that gate regardless. So the cost increase is actually what the amount above and beyond what you would have received if it went into the landfill pile. And you're already collecting $40 a ton. So how much it would be above that, I don't know. But that would also depend upon the item that you have, that the cost of recycling it. In the case of metal, you would be getting money for that metal, whereas if it was going to the landfill pile, you wouldn't get any money for it.
And I understand your point. The numbers were $1.4 million in revenue. Every container, as you well know, has a cost associated with it, a capital cost. And containers now can range up to $10,000. If we have to have personnel to manage that, you're looking at an average of $75,000, $80,000 all in per employee to manage this citizen's drop off. And then you're going to have a trucking cost that requires us to get it to a place where they can recover the material. And then a cost associated with either selling the material or being charged for the material. Those are the economics that I personally expected the subcommittees to look at in detail prior to bringing any recommendation to the full advisory committee.
Can we see that data that you're talking about?
I apologize, guys. I have to hard stop. So I apologize that I can't stay for the conversation.
Good holidays to you, Pete.
You too, guys.
Bye-bye.
Sarah,
Ruth,
to answer your
can we-
question, can we see the hard data? I think everyone would be willing to share, you know, the reasonable costs that, you know, would simply come into play. And I would imagine, I can't speak for the other companies, but I know personally, we would have to buy property to store some existing equipment on to even accommodate this initiative.
What kind of
So-
equipment?
We would have to buy additional property to store surplus containers to allow, generate any type of space possible and to accommodate this request of the committee. And I'm just stating the facts. I'm just trying to state the position of where we are on 10 acres with the truck traffic that we have in play every day. I know Outer Loop's on the call. I know Republic's on the call. Maybe I could get some comments from those folks as well.
Are you guys in a position to make a counter proposal on something you could do to help with this problem?
I think we could possibly put together an estimate on what costs that we would incur to accommodate this initiative.
Well, that isn't what I meant, actually. It's clear that y'all don't want to do it. And if you did want to do it, you would find the money and you would find the space. But given that you don't want to do it, are you all in a position to counter propose some initiative that you might be willing to commit to do to reduce the amount of perfectly good recyclable material that goes into the landfill?
Sarah Lynn, I respect your personal opinion. And it's not the fact that we do not want to do it. It is simply the logistics of attempting to put more activity on a piece of property that's extremely busy, that does not have the space for it. We cannot have people on foot, on property, amongst traffic, and then separating materials at this facility the way it stands today. So
Yeah,
there will
that-
be
but what I'm
changes
saying
required.
is, because I don't want to rehash that stuff. I don't like it when people lecture me about safety and health. What I would like to know is, can you counter propose something to help address the problem in a different way?
We can counter propose several things, and I can ask the company to look at that, Sarah Lynn.
Thank you, because I think that's probably a better approach at this stage of the game.
Any input from the other two people on the line?
I understand at least where one or two of the people coming from space. We do a little work with one or two of the people, and they do not have the space to do it. I know that. They barely have space for us to turn around there. So we have to be cognizant in what we're asking them to do if they don't physically have the infrastructure to get that done.
I know Marie Burnett is having trouble speaking, and if everybody has the chat open, you can read her comments. And Marie, if you have anything else to say, feel free to type if you can't get your audio to work.
Yeah, I think sorry, this is Andy with Waste Management. I think one of the things that we had mentioned in the previous conversation is the potential for additional industry support for some of the satellite C&D drop-off events. We can't really propose something specific on that because it would require, cooperation with Metro, and I'm not sure exactly what Metro's capacity is for additional events, even with, support from hauling companies on containers or trucks or, some combination of the above. But we're definitely willing to have that conversation. And then again, we understand that material that is recoverable needs to be kept out of the waste stream and kept away from disposal facilities. But as we stated on a previous call, it's our opinion that that should not be done at the end of the waste stream. It needs to happen upstream from the disposal facility itself.
Well, that's a productive comment. I appreciate it, Andy. I guess is what you're asking, is the Metro going to continue? First off, I guess there's multiple things with that question, comments, but are we going to continue the pop-off, drop-offs, and with what regularity?
Yeah, and is there any ability of, or capacity from the city to hold more events like that if there is additional industry support? What would the city's request for industry support for those events look like? Does the city say we have plenty of containers, but or we have plenty of staffing, but we need some assistance with the hauling, or we need assistance with staffing, those events at whatever location they are, or we need space for those, events to happen. If we can find something like that, it's just a conversation we haven't had. So, for me to say, hey, this sounds great, this is something that we would potentially be willing to do. I don't want to overpromise on that because I don't know what Metro's appetite is for that. Does that make sense?
10 events in a year was a lot, so I don't really foresee doing more personally.
Do you think you're going to continue the 10?
We will be continuing pop-up drop-off events. Yes, our schedule isn't completely done for 2022. This year we did add a 10th one at the end, so I'm not sure if we're going to, it wasn't well attended for various reasons, but I don't know that we'll schedule 10 for the year or if we will try to just go back to the 9 and in various places. We were just trying to hit maybe a location that might be underserved, but so we'll be looking at that, and of course we'll report any of that to our board and committees.
Okay, that's a good answer. I think you're saying you're going to continue at least 9, maybe not the 10,
Mhm.
but and you're
Yes.
looking at other stuff,
For
but
sure.
that means it's going to be an ongoing thing. That's a good answer. I just had a thought came to my mind, and I'll ask, I guess, is there any possibility of one of these sites that are not large enough, we're saying are not large enough to hold these things, to maybe close off for one Saturday or something like that? In other words, have a pop-off, drop-off type of an event held at a private facility where Metro could come in and help, and then you wouldn't have the people hauling the normal amount of stuff into there. In other words, that one for a couple hours that day or a Saturday or something, just say, okay, we're going to have a sort of a private pop-up drop-off. And it's just a thought. I just had that as a possible thought. If Andy or anybody else wants to answer that or something to think about.
I don't want to speak for Marie manages that site, the outer loop landfill, so I can't answer for her. I mean, I think that's something we could definitely, look at potentially, but I can't say for certain that we would be able to hold it at outer loop. But I think on the scale of concerns, I think having something dedicated on a specific time is better than having it be continuous. But I don't know if that crosses the threshold of something that we would be willing or able to do.
Okay, it's just a thought that's new.
Sure,
Just,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't know, where do we go from here?
I also think that we've asked the facilities to kind of let us know the quantity of people that come in self-haul, isn't that correct?
Yes, I
I
thought
don't,
so.
I don't think I've received, I know I haven't received any information on that as follow-up.
Any input on that from anybody?
No, we still owe you that information, and I think Pete was going to try to get the same information from the Waste Reduction Center as well. So I think we all owe the exact same information from all the haulers, including the city.
I'm not sure if it's still a factor in decisions and discussion for today, but I just know that that was lacking. So maybe we still try to get that info.
Yeah. All right. I don't know if we want to go, we're sort of been on item 1 of the agenda. Do we want to, you guys did send us as one of the attachments, I assume, the changes you made to the proposed recycling requirements. Do we want to talk about that at all?
It would be nice to talk about that if we're ready to move on.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Are we at a stalemate or? Not
Well,
sure.
do we know, I guess from Pete at the beginning, he mentioned, like, are we as are members of the subcommittee at least saying we want to keep discussing this?
That's a good point. He asked, I believe I wrote down, do we want to draft guidelines, regulations, or an ordinance?
Or
So-
maybe we still need more info.
Right.
I think we ought to give the regulated body an opportunity to come back and make a counter proposal. Because otherwise, it seems like we either yield and let the regulated body set policy, or we dig in our heels and have a big fight. And I'm looking for some sort of a middle ground here. And as far as I'm concerned, the ball's in their court. There's 35 tons that maybe we could do some improvements with on how we handle them.
Is it reasonable to ask for that type of a counter proposal by the next meeting? I assume we're going to have a meeting January.
I would assume that the proposal would be different for everybody because each one of them has a different constraint.
Oh,
to
yeah.
Deal with.
Oh, yeah. Unless they're all willing to get together and come up with one cohesively, but that's not our decision, right? So what I'm asking is that a reasonable thing? Does anybody see it as reasonable or not reasonable to ask for a counter proposal for next meeting?
I mean, you could argue that they don't have to.
Right. Well, that's why I'm asking before proposing something officially.
Right.
That is a possibility. We could propose and ask and vote on it, asking for a proposal, for counter proposals. But I'm asking for input before we do that as to anybody's thoughts and feelings on that.
Craig, I did state earlier that I'd be willing to try to put together the economic impact of our facility trying to accommodate this initiative.
Okay. Is that possible by next meeting, you think, or not?
One would think that it would be possible by next meeting, yes.
Thank you. Good.
We as staff can follow up with the 4 facilities if you want to task us to do that, and for scheduling, making sure people can try to be on the next call and everything.
That'd be great.
That helps.
Yeah, we will do what we can. I know that, I mean, the holiday is going to throw
Correct.
wrench in that with availability, but
Right.
if it's not the next meeting, I think the meeting after, at the outside, but we'll do what we can to have something as
That's
soon as
great.
possible.
Fantastic. I mean, it's good to make a goal of the next meeting, but it's certainly understandable if it takes a little more than that. But at least you'd have something being worked on for the next meeting, I would hope. So is that something that we want to, as a committee, make as a proposal to assign or ask staff to approach everyone about putting together a counter proposal, if possible, by the next meeting?
Yes, and I think asking the regulated body to tell us what it's going to cost to comply with the new program, it's a given throughout the history of this country. The regulated body always says a new rule is going to be super, super deal breaking expensive. I'd rather they spend their time on a counter proposal than cooking a whole long list of expenses up for us.
Okay.
I,
Sure.
I just want to respond to that quickly and say the reason why the cost is imperative on this is because of the statement in the recommendation that processing and diverting this material should cost less than the cost of disposal. That's the only reason that this is really a concern, is because you're essentially mandating a loss for the companies. You're saying we want this new process, but we want to mandate what the rate is for that without, frankly, caring what the cost is. That's fine, but that's why cost is a concern. If it was saying we're required to do this, we would have the same safety concerns, but we would not be as concerned about the additional cost because that could be recovered.
I'm not sure that I'm following that completely, but maybe I didn't.
You're asking us to perform a new process that's labor intensive, that will incur cost,
Okay.
which is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong about saying this will cost more if you can charge for the service what it costs. Our issue with saying that costs will increase is that the recommendation itself says that this new process shall not be allowed to exceed the cost of disposal currently, which is not a labor intensive process. You're asking for a new step in the process and you're demanding that we charge less for that. So it's creating a large delta between what the cost is and what the ability of the company is to pay for that cost or to recover that cost.
Can
That's
I
the
ask?
only reason, at least for waste management, that's an issue.
Can I ask that we look? Is that in the document, the third attachment that we all received? Can I ask where that is in the document? I'd like to look at that myself.
Yes, it's the statement that says that it shall be done at a cost lower than the cost of disposal.
Well, what it really says is the charge to the consumer shall be lower. It doesn't really address the functional operational charge behind that.
Correct. Yes, you're saying that if we take a load in right now for $60 a carload, which is what our self-haul charge is, that we would then have to reduce the rate to what our per ton disposal rate is,
See,
or less,
I didn't know
and
it's
also provide containers and staffing and sorting and transportation for all that material.
okay. I didn't know it said that. So can I ask what page or section number that we're discussing so I could actually look at the word?
I think he's probably referring to the actual study. I don't think it's in any draft ordinance yet, but
Okay.
let's
I
see.
mean,
Right, but Pete referenced that earlier when someone asked about expanded costs. He said that it was stated that the charge would be less than the cost of disposal, so it would ultimately be a wash.
okay. I didn't hear him say charge. I thought he said it should cost less to dispose of things like metal because you get money back for
Yeah,
them.
that is, well, if that's the statement, then that is definitely not the case.
You don't get more money back for metal?
We get money back for metal, but based on the amount of metal that we see in self-haul and other materials, it will cost us more than we will recoup, which again is fine if there is not the statement in the recommendation that says that we're required to charge less than the cost of disposal.
Just would be easier for me to actually see in writing what we're
Yeah,
talking.
sorry, I'm trying to find it. I don't have it pulled up right now, but I'm trying to get to it.
Okay. Because sometimes things are just thought to say something, but
I'm not muted, am I? No. I have it pulled up. This one, there's two different recommendations. This one that Andy's talking about is the countywide service level standards for self-haul facilities, which is not the self-haul separation requirement, but it does say requiring a uniform set of countywide standards to ensure recycling and yard waste composting are available at every transfer and disposal facility. These standards would require that disposal sites that accept self-haul garbage have adequate recycling infrastructure and accept common recyclables, yard waste, clean wood, metals, bulky for recycling and composting. Here's the part, at fees less than the fee for garbage disposal. The materials would then be sent to recycling and processing facilities, including dry waste processing for bulky items.
And from what are you reading again?
The self-haul recommendation in the study.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Is
So
that
in
what-
other words, they're losing money.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, they could be charging, I'm assuming that when they're charging, say, $60 a ton, they're doing it with the intention of some profit in there, or they probably wouldn't be doing it. And therefore, there should, in theory, be some margin in there. And, they're
Oh, it's
also going to have
$40
some,
a ton.
pardon?
I thought it was $40 a ton.
Well, I thought Andy just said, but regardless of what he just said, you guys are charging more than your true cost in order to earn some profit. And we haven't even discussed that there ought to be some savings in the sense that the other dumpsters aren't getting filled up as quickly, for example.
I like Sarah Lynn's idea. Let them come back with a proposal and let's see what happens.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so do we need to have a vote? I'm asking staff, or is it staff? I guess I'm asking you, Karen or Diane, is it okay for you guys to do that, or do you want us to vote on it?
I don't,
think we need a vote. I don't know how we're doing action. We're just asking somebody to come back with a proposal.
Okay, good.
and we'll just put it in the minutes that it's an action item so that we know that something is going to be done, and we'll take care of the, in between the month, we'll be talking to everybody.
Excellent. Okay.
Not a trash guy. I definitely understand where Mr. Andy and Bruce is coming from. If you're asking me to do more services and saying I can't raise the price, that doesn't add up. That just doesn't work.
Okay. All right. I mean, I guess wasn't sure how clear all this was before this meeting. Now talking about it, maybe my bad, but all right. So, is there a point then to going over the regulations? I think Karen or Diane, do you want to do that a little bit? As any other input from anybody? As far as I can see, we're kind of done with the first part. And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can spend the last few minutes looking. Basically, Diane and I went through that document. Diane, do you want to scroll to the top?
Yep.
Thank you. Just to remind everyone what we called it, the proposed recycling requirements for multifamily residential properties.
And this is what was sent to us as an attachment.
Yes, we
Yes.
sent it out.
I looked at it, yeah.
The changes that were made came from the meeting last month.
Right.
So, and then anything italicized there is actually just ordinance that we put in there as a reference to easily see what it's, what we might refer to. Because I know we had a lot of our discussion was like, well, we could refer to this ordinance because it's already written. We don't have to rewrite things. So,
Got it. Thank you.
hopefully everyone got a chance to kind of look at it already, but I don't know. We can look through it together.
It's really confusing because I didn't understand that you were the significance of the italics and pageant or the indentations.
Yeah, now that you've said it, I wasn't sure if that was what we were proposing or what was that current, so that's
Those
great.
are actual ordinances. So basically, like for example, at the top here, the person or entity required under those ordinances to do this is who we would who is the responsible party that we're referring to in this document.
Actually, that's excellent, and I think that's what we wanted
Yes.
to do and have. I just wasn't 100% clear, like, but that's great now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
don't
that way we're
forget.
not that way we're not
Don't tell us
redefining.
to do this.
Yeah, that we're not redefining it. But if the Louisville Metro code, whatever, gets changed, then our stuff automatically changes, and that's, I think, what we all wanted to happen. Yes, thank you.
So Diane, go ahead and scroll a little bit further. If you all, we don't have to read through all the ordinance there. And then multifamily residential properties, just another definition. Does it say, is there a B? Did we leave one of those in?
Yeah,
See,
this
no.
has got some issues. Maybe what
Yeah.
you ought to do is put the reference citations and endnotes or footnotes so that we can try to view the new stuff coherently.
That's fine. For now, we'll just scroll through. So
Yeah.
there's just two definitions. Keep going, Diane. The effective dates, where are you? There you are. Again, we did not really, well, there's no dates, of course, but we did edit to where it says the last one is 9 or more, because this would only affect multifamily greater than 9 anyway, or greater than 8 technically. And then the containers, the responsible party shall provide enough containers and container capacity for the occupants to dispose of recycling materials into a recycling container. We really thought that through because we wouldn't want there to be enough capacity for waste. Because sometimes if there's not enough room in the recycling bin, you might put it in the garbage. So the goal would be to have enough capacity for recycling to go in recycling containers. And then, of course, I think, Sarah Lynn, you had mentioned trying to get an ordinance to refer to on this. And if you have anything else that you can find, that's fine. But I could only really find exterior property and rubbish and garbage ordinances and like the...
If I were still at the health department, I could give you a citation, but.
Yeah, I didn't know what I don't know anything about any.
It's
other
called premise sanitation. You might just go into the Google ordinance section and search on premise sanitation. And if you call over there, just be warned, they pronounce it premise sanitation, and you don't understand what they're talking about. And here's somebody from, who's 5746000? APCD? Who knows? Pick it later.
All right, so we can.
Could I ask a question? It seems that this is focused on an ordinance for multifamily unit facilities. Would that be correct, Karen?
We are proposing guidelines right now, but it is focused on multifamily, not all. Like the first, I think when we first talked about it, we were going to talk about multifamily and businesses, like commercial businesses, but as recommended, we are kind of honing in just on multifamily at first.
Okay, and it does seem to point toward an ordinance, and I was just going to make a point to the subcommittee that in the study under figure 3 on page 6, Mr. Chairman, of the study, it says that in concentrating on the short-term goals, we should spend our time on expanded service, waste reduction, and limited regulation while preserving choice. This seems to be a major jump into ordinances for multifamily right away, in my opinion, and that is not really what the study had recommended. The focus was on short-term goals to the year 2026, which would now be expanded to 2028 because we were 2 years delinquent in getting the study in. But that was not released, of course, the study, as you know, till January of 2018. So I was just going to bring that to the subcommittee's attention, that it seems to me we're working on an area that is in the longer term goals, not the shorter term goals. Does anybody else have an opinion on that?
I don't have that all in front of me, so I can't comment one way or another. I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah, the specific language was to focus on expanded service, waste reduction, and limited regulation while preserving choice. And to me, it does not seem that this is in that area on the short term.
Choice in what? When it says expanding choice and what?
Preserving choice, Sarah Lynn.
You meaning you can go take your business elsewhere?
No, that's not the way I would interpret that. I would interpret that as, for example, this document seems to require multi-units to move immediately toward a requirement based on size for mandatory recycling. I have not seen that we've done any pilot programs, nor have we had any discussion with the stakeholders that would be directly impacted with that. They may have some great suggestions about this. So to me, for us to execute against this document without those things, I believe would be inappropriate.
Well, I think what the group is trying to do is to get a ball in the air. And given that we've had so much pushback from that group in the past, I think it's pretty important to put on paper what it is we're thinking before we ask them for input. Otherwise, we'll all be arguing about grandiose, imaginated ideas. If we have it on black and white, we can at least argue over what we're actually thinking instead of somebody else's contrived imagination, etc.
I have another concern, and that is that we're talking about a committee that is not dealing with residential. And yet this is totally targeted to residential, multifamily. And I agree to some extent with Brian in that we have done no preliminary work to get to the point where we're putting something on paper. And as I've expressed concerns before, when I look at some of the words in here, and I think about some of the physical plants that would have to deal with this, I think we need feedback from things like the apartment association that came and used to come to our meetings in the past. I think that we can be successful, but I think that if we throw out something like this to begin with, we run the risk of creating a hostile environment that we don't have to create.
But Sandra, don't you think that audience would fare better if they saw in writing what it is we're thinking about instead of opening the can of worms of how would you like us to tell you to recycle? Because it's going to be just like what we just went through with the self-haul. They don't want to do it and they're pushing back, and now we're at a standstill. I just don't see the value of arguing over concepts when we could argue over words.
This is JD Carey with the Louisville Apartment Association. I think that comment that you make is inaccurate, that we would like to be part of the process. But when you put something out like this, that's saying that it's mandatory that multifamily start recycling on the properties with no cost assessments done, no pilot program, like Brian was saying, done to see how this is going to work. And I do have other members, other owners on the meeting today that would like to say a few things, but I think it's being part of the process, not seeing a document like this come out that it's mandatory that every property is going to have to do this.
If it's not mandatory, why do we even need to do it?
I think JD is spot on though, and if you make it mandatory, we just had I'm Travis Yates and I do affordable housing here in Louisville, and we just had one where we've had recycling center on there for about 4 years on a project that has 250 units. It's being removed, And the reason why it's being removed, because the residents didn't use it. And if you look at demographic maps in the city, it certainly seems that lower income typically you do not use recycling centers as much. So what ends up happening is the waste management companies then come back to us and charge us for having improper materials in that recycling bin. And when they charge that, we charge that back to the resident. And if they don't pay that, the only recourse we have is eviction. And we're in a real tie in the last year and a half about Louisville being one of the highest eviction rates in the country. And our only recourse on any of these things is through eviction. I think this is a straight attack on low income residents. I really do. I think when you do this, you're going to put it might be a disparate impact, but you are going to go after low income and poverty stricken residents because they're less likely to recycle. Now, whether you want to do that through education, you want to do it anything else, I'm telling you from a multifamily perspective, you're not going after people that can own homes. You're only going after people that can only afford to rent. So when you only go after multifamily, you're going after lower income residents, and I have a real problem with that. I think there's a straight disparate impact issue.
Well, it's 4:19. We're supposed to end at 4:15, and I can see a lot of discussion happening here now. Without Pete here too, I'm not sure how to continue this. So
You could just hold it for the next agenda.
yeah.
I think we'll have to. I also think there's bound to be some apartment complexes that recycle, right?
This is routine in some countries that all apartment buildings have recycling. I think we need to decide, are we going to do something to make it better, or are we going to let the regulated body do whatever the hell it wants? And if we're going to do something better, I think putting it in black and white is mandatory. Otherwise, all we're doing is listening to complaints.
Before we close, I would also, like to just clarify to anyone on the call that is maybe concerned about this document as if it is suddenly law, because it's not, and that's why we're here discussing it. And I do believe something does have to be on paper in order to have discussion, so I'm not exactly sure how else to go about these recommendations without getting something on paper.
Thank you, and I agree. It's a proposal, and I guess if people want to come back in writing as to what they would like to change or not change, can we ask them to do that to you, or?
Well, I think that we should do the usual thing that government does. We draft a rule, we have public hearings, and we get people's responses to it, and we take their responses into consideration. I'm not sure why this would be any different.
But shouldn't some kind of cost assessment be done or anything backing,
but
this proposal?
We have to define what it is we're talking about in order to do the cost assessment. Otherwise, it's silly.
This is basically the point. I mean, this is after a couple meetings of discussing this proposal of guidelines. This is the closest it's been, I think, to what the subcommittee wants. So my thought today was that we would look at it and make sure we received all discussion from last month, and make any, if we need to make more edits, that's fine. So at this point, though, if it's sparking enough discussion as is, I guess we can, stop that part of it, and next month have, I suppose, more discussion with stakeholders.
Yeah. And can we ask anyone that has issues to specifically come back with comments on it, and not generalities things, but specific comments?
Well, the other part of that is you've got to invite them. They may not know that this is confronting them.
Well, how did these folks know to show up? Who told them?
I don't know.
Well, it isn't official yet. It is just a proposed.
Right, but I mean, I think this fella says I thought somebody said they were in charge of an association of landlords of some sort. It sounds like they've been notified, eh?
Yes, and I
Have
received
they been
this
notified, Karen?
document. That's why I asked some of the actual property owners to come on to talk about it.
Yes.
And we'll be happy to come back next month to the next committee meeting to discuss it.
Could you put anything in Can they put anything in writing? Too, it'll be easier, I think, than having a lot of people just talk back and forth. If anything in writing would be appreciated too, I think.
All right, sure, we will do that.
Okay. I think we need to end the meeting soon, so.
We don't have a regular full committee meeting in a few minutes, correct?
That's
Correct. Correct.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes. Well, but I just wanted to be cognizant of people's time. This is supposed to be an hour meeting, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Everyone, thank you for showing up. Merry Christmas. Have a good holiday.
Bye, everybody.
I assume there'll be something put out before the next meeting that we can look at. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.